Why does everyone hate white people? And I don't mean this metaphorically, I genuinely mean it. Why is everyone bullying white people as a collective? And it seems that we now live in a time where minorities have just think it's okay to go around bullying white people as, I don't know, as some kind of revenge for how the white people won the war of colonization that everyone was a part of, but white people just happened to discover gunpowder. And now everyone just holds a grudge against white people as a collective and feels like it's okay to bully them and talk about them as a group and shit on them and say that they have white privilege and this and that. But meanwhile, white people, if they say anything remotely as mean, they just will get shit for it. Like, you're not allowed to say that, you're a racist, blah, blah, blah. It just seems that there's a lot of things that are now by default granted for minorities or minorities in white majority countries that just white people don't get the same rights. And I don't fucking understand it. So let's talk about that. Welcome to the Social Condom. Thank you for tuning in. We are going to talk about why everyone hates white people. So let's just get started. And just a reminder, this is just my opinion, and I don't claim to have any facts or scientific knowledge or expertise in any specific area. So this is just my unfiltered, raw opinion. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, tell me why. If you think there's something else that should be said, let me know. But just a disclaimer, this is just my opinion. So I feel like I don't know what happened, but people just started, like, if you come to the US, if you look at people in the US and you pay attention to how they go about their lives and go about beating the system, it seems that there's a lot of complaining about what the system is and how it is built to go against the minorities, how it's built to go against the immigrants and the black people and the Latinos and all the minority groups. And for some reason, it doesn't feel like white people get the same kind of sympathy or are cut the same kind of slack. And it's sort of a given that a white person should succeed and minority or brown person is meant to struggle. And I feel like that's very unfair because we always see that the system is on the white person's side and then against anyone else. And so when anything happens to us as minorities, we always blame the system and we don't really claim any kind of responsibility. We're just like, oh, fuck the system, fuck those taxes, whatever. But then when a white person is struggling equally the same, just like everyone else, it feels like none of these excuses are made up for them as a majority in the United States specifically. And it just, I don't know, it just feels like a form of dehumanization where we just feel like a specific group is a part of a system as opposed to a part of the collective human species. So just to further describe this, it's like white people, just like brown people, just like yellow people, just like blue and green and red people, they all struggle the same way. If it seems that we look at the top 1% and the majority of them are white, and then we just say, oh, well, that means that all white people are rich and that all white people are successful, all white people are a part of the corruption, all white people are XYZ. And we just forget that the majority, the 99% of people, the majority of whom are white, are struggling. So when you think of the minority that's struggling, we tend to forget that most of the people that are struggling are actually not minorities. Most of them are white. If you wanna look at the percentage of the white group and then how many of them are successful versus how many of them are not successful, and then you want to do the same for every single group, you might find that there's a higher percentage of white people that are successful. But when you look at the collective of people, the 99%, the majority of people who are struggling, the majority of people who are middle class, the majority of people who are lower class are going to be white people. And I'm talking about mainly in the US. And that's just as a result of the demographic of the country. So it just feels like we throw this word white privilege, white privilege, white privilege everywhere, sort of giving everyone immunity from taking any kind of responsibility or any kind of blame, and giving everyone the benefit of the doubt and sympathizing with everyone except for white people. And that just feels very fucked up, honestly. And for some reason, white people are just like okay with this somehow. And I'm not to generalize, but I feel like white people have been bullied or brainwashed into believing that they're somehow responsible for everything that European colonizers have done. Like all the crimes that European colonizers have committed, and all the racism and all the slavery and all the exploitation of resources and all the wars and all of that shit. Somehow white people have just been convinced that they're somehow responsible for it, and they need to be apologetic about it. Like a white person doesn't need to be apologetic for something that another white person did, much like a black person doesn't need to be apologetic for a crime another black person committed, or a Muslim person doesn't have to be apologetic for something another Muslim person did, or an Arab or an Indian or a Chinese or anything else for that matter. So why is it that we expect white people to somehow be more careful, to somehow be more feel responsible for the crimes of, I don't even want to say their ancestors, for the crime of people in history who just happen to share the same level of melanin in their skin with them? It just seems to me bizarre that we even expect that of white people, but even more bizarre that somehow white people fell into this trap of feeling that they're responsible. Like the Germans feel so guilty for the Holocaust. Like it has nothing to do with you. This happened 100 years ago. What do you have to do with this? And why are you guilty? Why are you apologetic? Why are you to blame? Because when you take any kind of guilt upon yourself, you're also claiming responsibility for what happened, when that has nothing to do with you. Like it's a trap that none of us should fall for, and none of us should be subject to. Muslims committed plenty of crimes back in their day. The Crusaders committed plenty of crime. Everyone, every walk of life on this earth, if human only, has committed horrible crimes throughout their history. So it seems very unreasonable that anyone now, hundreds of years later, or 10 years later, I shouldn't be responsible for my father's crimes. So it's like, it's ridiculous. And yeah, and I just feel like there's so much transgenerational guilt, especially in the US. And it feels like yes, we should all stand up for justice and all of that. But it feels like white people are especially expected to stand up. Otherwise, they're complicit in some kind of systematic racism. Which just brings me back to the idea of speaking up and the idea of social justice. Every decent person should probably speak up for what's right if they can. And we all at some point probably have spoken up for something, for an issue, whether related to us, or like whether that directly affects us or just affects other people, but we feel like we can help out. We've all probably spoken up. However, speaking about systematic racism, let's say there are still rules in place, or there are still racist effects due to the United States racist history that are taking place to this day and affecting people of a certain skin color or people of a certain demographic. It is not more a white person's responsibility to stand up against that than it is a black person's or a Latino's or an immigrant or whatever. Not that white people are not immigrants, but whatever. You got my point. It's not a white person's responsibility more than it is anyone else's, because that white person is not complicit in whatever it is. And even if you claim that the system is giving white people some kind of privilege, it is still not their responsibility to speak up against that. It's typically the responsibility of whoever is affected by said tragedy to stand up and speak up against it. And then if someone feels like they have the power to make a change, then they should, regardless of their background. And we should just get rid of the notion that somehow a certain group of people, simply for their skin color, is more responsible. Now, if we were talking about America 50 years ago, or 70 years ago, or 100 years ago, where white people were certainly more privileged and men were certainly more privileged than women, then these privileged groups, it would be great for them to speak up. And we could argue that it's their responsibility to speak up, seeing that there is such discrepancy in the privileges provided and the rights given. However, in today's day and age in the United States, it doesn't seem that the white person is obviously granted certain benefits that anyone else is not. And so that does not put any more weight on their shoulders or responsibility that they should burden themselves with. And we certainly shouldn't be judging them accordingly. And on a lighter note, I always see like comedy shows, specifically stand-up comedy shows, where the comedian, who is typically, let's say, not a white person, they just kind of, I don't know who granted them this permission, but they just kind of get a green light. And I get it, the stand-up comedians make fun of everyone. However, it seems that white people are particularly bullied when it comes to stand-up comedy, or when it comes to content in general. I feel like people could just talk shit about white people and make fun of them, or their culture, or their traditions, or their behaviors, or their cuisine, whatever it is. It just seems that everyone has gotten a green light to shit on white people specifically, but also minorities kind of get the green light to shit on each other. That's fine. But if a white person were to shit on anyone else, they would be reprimanded for it. They would be called racist. How dare you talk about black culture? How dare you talk about Muslims? How dare you talk about Jews? Like, it's insane, the double standard that you see, and this happens all the time. And so you'll see that white people are cornered in stand-up comedy when they are trying to make fun of someone. They only have to make fun of themselves, or when they make fun of like themselves or white people, or when they make fun of another group, it'll always somehow end up being a compliment and will end up saying something worse about white people. Somehow the white people have been cornered into this self-destructive behavior, where if they're not being self-destructive, then they cannot do this to anyone else, versus everyone else has the right to do this to them. And it's just crazy, the double standard. And I know that stand-up comedy is just comedy, but still, there are some rules that apply to it, and it seems that these rules can have real life effects, and also these rules are very biased against white people. Yeah, so basically, if you are a minority or a majority, like whatever fucking group or race you fall under, you shouldn't have any specific privileges. Like the whole idea of this modern civilization, and as society moves forward, and as our understanding of each other and understanding of psychology and society and culture moves forward, the entire premise of it is equality, essentially. And so our histories shouldn't judge what kind of privileges we get now based on how sad your ancestors' history was. You simply don't get extra credit as an individual, because we're all just individuals regardless of your group that you fit under. You're just an individual. And so you're entirely disconnected from everything that has happened before you. And we need to come to the realization that we are not responsible for anyone's behavior, and we're not going to be punished for anyone's behavior. And so we shouldn't be rewarded for anyone's behavior as well. And we shouldn't be paid back, especially not on the account of someone else who is also separate from the history. If I'm a minority and my ancestors have had a horrible history, I can't get rewarded or like get payback or reimbursed on the account of a white person simply because their ancestors abused my ancestors. If you want to reimburse me, fine. Okay, if we can actually track down the damages that has been done, and then we want to set the scale and set the balance, fine. But it can't come on the account of someone else. And so, just speaking of freedom of speech and bullying, we as people and people as minorities simply don't get the right to bully white people on the account of the history that happened between their ancestors. That just makes no sense. Moral of the story is, we can't end racism by being racist. So we can't claim that we're making equilibrium in society by being racist to white people because their ancestors were racist to us in the past. Like, that's not how we create equality. We can't fall for the trap of thinking that this is somehow okay. It's somehow okay to bully an entire people because their ancestors or some of their ancestors did wrong things. Everyone's ancestors did wrong things. Humans are just shitty by default. There is no group of people that is worse than anyone else. It just so happens that white people discovered gunpowder and were able to win in this fucked up race that everyone was already taken a part of. And now everyone feels like a victim, and everyone feels like, oh, it's the white person's problem. It's not. It never was. And if it was your ancestors that discovered gunpowder, it would have been the same circumstances, only you would have had the upper hand, but you still wouldn't have accepted to be held responsible for anyone else's actions. And so we can't end racism by being racist and by upholding racist ideologies and racist practices. We have to understand that even on sarcastic or on joking levels, these things have real life effects. Not only further separating us and further creating gaps between these different groups, but also creating real life effects where people's subconsciousness being affected by these subtle ideas could in the future manifest in under the right circumstances, manifest to real life consequences. So let's acknowledge that we're all equal and act accordingly and not just say it. And at the very least, if we're going to bully white people in our content or in our jokes or in our stand-up comedy, then at least expect as much from white people and uphold them to the same standards that you hold yourself to. So thank you for watching The Social Condom and listening to The Social Condom. This topic pissed me off. So let me know what you thought in the comments. All right, have a good one.